You may have heard about these situations where people are convicted of, say, murder or manslaughter, but they won't reveal to the family or families what happened to the body or bodies. Is there anything that can be done about that? Is there any pressure that can be brought to bear on them? Possibly. But before we look at that, I just need to explain how life sentences work, and you probably know this already. Obviously, when you normally get a life sentence, you do not spend the rest of your life in prison. The court sets what is called a tariff, and the tariff is the minimum number of years that you must serve before you are eligible for parole, before you can apply for parole. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll automatically be released after that time. It just means that's the first time you can start to say, well, maybe you should release me. Um, there's also whole life orders where they don't set a tariff. It's effectively you are going to spend the rest of your life in prison. Even they're not absolute though. Under the ECHR, whole life orders are compatible with the ECHR, but it's been held that there has to be some possibility of release or the sentence being reviewed. That's not to guarantee that you will ever get out, just that there has to be a glimmer of hope. So at some stage, a life prisoner will end up before the parole board, and then they will say, "Look, it's safe to let me out now. I am reformed, whatever, whatever." However, there is something now called the Prisoners (brackets Disclosure of Information about Victims) close brackets Act 2020. And what that says is, where somebody's received a life sentence after a conviction for murder or manslaughter, and it's believed they may know what happened to a body, even if it's not, whether it's them or somebody else disposed of it or whatever, then the parole board must take into account the fact that they haven't disclosed that information and the reason for that non-disclosure. Now, it doesn't mean to say that it's a blanket ban on ever being released, but what it does, it puts an obligation on the parole board to consider that actually as a factor. Okay, so the idea is, they can turn around and say, "Well, I'm sorry, unless and until you start cooperating, you're never getting out." So that's the idea. Also, that also applies where people have been convicted in relation to photographs of minors, shall we just say, and they can't identify the children. They can make the same thing, which is you must cooperate in identifying these children, so that they can be rescued. So there you go. Yeah. So there are some provisions, like I say, they come into a play at the end of sentence, like and things. There's no real pressure you can bring to bear on somebody at the beginning of the sentence. But there you go. That's the best we've got at the moment. If you found that useful, please consider clicking the like button, subscribing, and sharing.